Now, along with the proposed ammo hub, Subic Bay is already the site of several defense-related developments. In March this year, the Philippines military announced it would convert Grande and Chiquita Islands into military reservations. And a month later, the Marines announced a massive storage facility that, according to the U.S. Naval Institute, could mark the largest pre-positioning effort to date between Washington and Manila since 1992, when bases were shut down. Aguila Maintenance, Repair and Overhaul Hub is a privately owned U.S. shipyard, with South Korea's Hyundai Heavy Industries expected to start operations there, repairing Philippine frigates and corvettes as early as this year. Renato, let me come to you first. So these are some of the elements of this jigsaw. We are homing in on Subic Bay. When you put it all together, what is the bigger picture that you get at Subic Bay?
Well, to build up, to again provide support for the United States Navy. Again, of course, historically, Subic Naval Base has been a very important port for the 7th Fleet, when the 7th Fleet was still operating from Subic Naval Base. Unfortunately, of course, after the withdrawal of the United States Navy in 1992, they removed some of the facilities. More significantly, the dry docks. That was removed, of course, from Subic Naval Base. So we're slowly seeing, those facilities coming back, but not the United States Navy, but in form of a private company, Hyundai. I think during the Biden administration, the Secretary of the Navy went to South Korea and told Hyundai, we want your presence in the Philippines. And of course, that also serves the interest of the Philippine Navy, because most of the modern ships acquired by the Philippine Navy was, of course, built by Hyundai Heavy Industry. So it serves both U.S. and Philippine interests, given, if the United States would, of course, and other countries would, of course, develop Subic Bay as similar, but on a commercial basis, just like the good old days of Subic Naval Base before 1992.
The elements that we've listed out, as well as what Renato has told us, in terms of preparing for the worst-case scenario, which is a Taiwan crisis, how do these parts add up for you?
Well, I would say that they are building up a redundancy so that whatever scenario the PLA presents to the first island chain, whether it's South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, even moving more south, it gives the U.S. military options in terms of conducting operations and not having to worry about the tyranny of distance. That's number one. Number two, I think it also, besides preparing for a conflict, it makes it also more complicated for the Chinese Communist Party's PLA, because now there are assumptions about how long it would take for the U.S. Navy to show up, or the U.S. Air Force to show up, or to sustain themselves for a long period of time now becomes more difficult for them. And so they have to adjust their planning. And so this complicates their potential for success if they try to do anything. So it acts as a deterrence simply by building up these kinds of war reserves all over the Indo-Pacific region.
The U.S. is logistically prepared and ready to go,
right,
essentially. Renato, so let's take a look at why the Subic Bay location is particularly strategic. We have a map that we can show here. Talk us through the geography from that security point of view.
Okay, just to give you a background regarding why Subic Naval Base. Well, it began, of course, when the Philippines became a colony of the United States. Originally, the U.S. Navy was looking at Manila Bay, but the U.S. Army said no. No. So eventually, of course, the United States Navy looked at Subic Naval Base, and they found a natural deep water port. And it's very secure. Of course, right now, the Philippines is being ravaged by typhoons, but that natural bay provides protection for a ship. So eventually, of course, after the Second World War, the United States Navy really focused on developing Subic Naval Base. So that has been always the hub. Of course, it was very unfortunate that the Philippine Senate in September 1991 said, we're not concurring to the Philippine-American Cooperation Treaty of 1992. So voila. So again, the location is primarily directive. Look at the position of the bay; it goes straight into the South China Sea. So that's it. And again, the fact that it's a natural deep water port.
Right. And no coincidence that Chinese spies were arrested,
Yes.
gathering information about Subic Bay.
Plus, of course, another element regarding Subic Bay after it was vacated by the United States Navy, it's actually 85% underutilized. I don't think the Constitution would allow the return of American forces on, the same way as when they operated Clark and Subic Naval Base during before 1992. They're happening on a commercial basis. The United States Navy, the United States Marine Corps is interacting with the Subic Bay Authority, not with the Philippine government. So all interactions are on a commercial basis.
Right. So nevertheless, Gemon, what is the strategic or symbolic, significance of the U.S. investing in Subic Bay after, 3 decades of leaving it where it was a U.S. base? Can we say that the U.S. is returning to Subic?
Yes, but not 100% as it was before. As Renato mentioned, the Senate of the Philippine government asked the U.S. military to leave, and they left. Let's recall that the U.S. administered the Philippines as a colonial territory from 1898 to 1946, but prior to that, 300 years of Spanish rule. There are over 4 million Filipino Americans that have been in the U.S. military. So there's a lot of Filipino-American close relationships. So this kind of close relationship reinvigorates that bond that the Philippines and the United States have, which not many other countries in the world have, by the way. These troops that are coming are under either the Visiting Forces Agreement, VFA, or under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, both approved by the Senate. So that's the way that the Constitution was allowed these kinds of agreements to occur. But they don't create permanent bases. So in effect, they're coming back, but under the new rubric of the Philippine Constitution and the needs of the Philippine government and the needs of the U.S. government.
Does it represent a reversal of the decline of those U.S. ties, U.S.-Philippine ties, Renato, which happened in the 1980s? Is it absolute confirmation?
Of course, what happened after 1991 was the end of the Cold War. Suddenly, the calculation was gone. Subic and Clark Air Base was primarily directed at Soviet military presence at Cam Ranh Bay. Those were the days of the Cold War when I was still a young researcher at the Foreign Service Institute, and we will be doing our research in Clark, where you have, of course, the 13th Air Force and Subic Naval Base. Those days suddenly disappeared when the Soviet Union, of course, imploded. And of course, at that time, China was not yet a power to reckon with. The only time people in the Philippines realized that, oh my goodness, you have a big dragon knocking on our door, was when the Mischief Reef incident happened in 1995. That was, of course, the beginning then when the Ramos administration realized, oh, I think we made a mistake in telling the Americans to leave Subic in September 1991. So eventually you have the status of forces, as mentioned by, when Visiting Force Agreement was negotiated and eventually ratified by the Philippine Senate in 1999. Then, of course, going to 2014, the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. But again, there's also a possibility of a return of a Subic Clark Air Base style, because actually the Constitution does not prohibit. The Philippine Constitution provides a caveat. If the majority or 2/3 of the Philippine senators would concur to another agreement, then you could have the return of American forces under the same framework as the Military Bases Agreement of 1947. But again, this is a political challenge for any Philippine president. If he wanted basically to return back to the situation where you have, at a given point in time when Clark and Subic were in the Philippines, you have about 60,000 American troops on Philippine soil at a given point in time before November 1992.
Which is more than, how many troops in Japan at the moment?
I think around 50,000.
Right. So more than that. Gemont, so what does it say about the strength of the U.S.-Philippine alliance?
I think there are, as Renato mentioned, there are some very clear threats rising, and especially the last few years, the Philippine Navy and the Philippine Coast Guard and the Philippine people have been suffering from the aggression by the Chinese Coast Guard, the Chinese Navy, all these different activities. And since the 2016 decision by The Hague that the region that the Chinese have occupied, those islands, is illegal, it's only gotten worse. And so I think whether it's the Biden administration or the Trump administration, everybody realizes that the Philippines and the United States need to work together to enhance the alliance. Now, specifically, as Marcos said, President Marcos said, these are decisions made by the Philippines based on their own environment. It's not the Americans telling them, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. No, the Philippine government understands what the threat is. They live next door to it.
Yeah,
and
perhaps they wouldn't be making these decisions. He wouldn't be spending that money if China wasn't threatening
Exactly.
the West Philippine Sea, the South China Sea.
Or again, the lesson we learned after 6 years of the Duterte administration, whether you appease or challenge China, you just get the same result, subjugation. So might as well challenge China.
Right.
you also maintain your sovereignty.
Yeah, and dignity, of course. Not becoming a tributary state of the Middle Kingdom.